Hello there, and welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Sprite Knight, and in these podcasts, I like talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. So, let's get into it, shall we? Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, is once again directed by George Miller, who also directed all the previous 4 Mad Max movies. And that was one of the reasons that this was my most anticipated movie of the year. Because I love, and I mean love, all the previous 4 Mad Max movies. Whether it's the first Mad Max film, Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior, which I think is one of the best sequels of all time, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, I adore to pieces, but I adore to pieces for different reasons that I adore Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior, and then Mad Max Fury Road, which was made like 30 years after the predecessor, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Mad Max Fury Road was just amazing. I love that film so much, and because this film was a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, I was dead excited about seeing it. This is a prequel in that it follows Furiosa, a character we first met in Fury Road, and a character who was played by Charlize Theron in that movie, and I'm pretty sure I got the pronunciation correct. I'm pretty sure I got the pronunciation of Charlize Theron correct. So yeah, a character we first met played by her in that movie, and in this film, because it's a prequel, she's played by Anya Taylor-Joy. Anya Taylor-Joy is probably best known for starring in such things as The Queen's Gambit. She had a role in Peaky Blinders. She was great in Last Night in Soho, and she most recently voiced Peach in the Super Mario Brothers movie, or maybe not most recently, but not too long ago she voiced Peach in that film. And this is her newest movie, and she's playing a young Furiosa, a young version of Charlize Theron's character from Fury Road, opposite Chris Hemsworth, who's probably best known for playing Thor in the Marvel movies. But my favourite performance of his is in Ron Howard's film, Rush. He is so good in Rush. But yeah, Anya Taylor-Joy is starring opposite Chris Hemsworth in this film, who is playing the villain, Dr. Dementus. And with that cast, with George Miller directing, and with the trailers for this film, which looked exhilarating and looked like this, and made this film look like it was going to be an unbelievably exciting blockbuster that was going to restore my faith in action movie blockbusters, because I haven't really got many great action movie blockbusters recently, in my opinion. With all that, with the trailers, George Miller directing, the cast, and the way this film looked, I was so excited, particularly because I am a big Mad Max fan. And I wanted to see this the day it came out, but I was busy the day it came out. It came out last Friday, and I was a bit busy that day. And then the couple of the days following last Friday, I didn't feel too well, so I didn't get around to seeing this till a couple of days ago now. And in that time, from when it first released worldwide, and the time when I first got around to seeing it, I'd heard quite a few things about it, and I'd seen the trailer a couple more times on the TV. And because I'd heard quite a few things about the movie, quite a few important and big things about the plot of the movie, it did affect my viewing the first time. And I came out of the cinema after watching this movie for the first time, again I want to reiterate that, for the first time, and I was really disappointed. But I also knew that when I was watching the movie for the first time, I was thinking to myself, I know I have to go back and rewatch this now. I'm gonna have to come back to this very cinema tomorrow and rewatch this movie. And that's exactly what I did the other day. So having seen this film twice now, hear my thoughts on it. Hear my thoughts on Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. Honestly, I like this movie a lot. I think it does a great job at building on the world of the Mad Max franchise, something none of the other Mad Max movies have really done in great detail. I love how we get to learn loads more about the character of Furiosa, a character who has only been in one Mad Max film before this, and we learn so much about her and her the way we see this character grow up in the movie, the way we learn about her backstory, I thought was very engaging and very well done. It's a very well directed movie. It's got George Miller's stamp all over it. It feels like a Mad Max film, because even though it's not actually a Mad Max film, he's not really in the film, the character of Mad Max. He makes a cameo, that isn't a spoiler by the way, that's been revealed by George Miller in the marketing of the movie, so yeah. That's not a spoiler whatsoever. But even so, he does make a cameo. It's not a Mad Max movie. But it still feels like a Mad Max film. Though it's got everything you want from a Mad Max movie. And there was just so much that I really liked about it. Some things that I loved about it even. But I didn't love the movie as a whole. And I think the reason I didn't love this movie, the biggest reason I didn't love this movie, was because it didn't give me that adrenaline rush that the previous 4 Mad Max movies gave me. I remember watching, and it was only about a year ago that I did this, watching the first 4 Mad Max films for the first time and, feeling out of breath when I'd finished each one of those movies, and having this adrenaline rush when I'd finished each one of those movies as well. Like, I remember finishing Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior, one of the best sequels of all time. Pretty sure I've already said that, but I'm going to say it again because it is really one of the best sequels of all time. I remember finishing that second Mad Max movie and going outside and just running about in the garden because of the adrenaline rush I had from that film, and I had that from each one of the Mad Max movies, and I wanted to get that from this film because, although it's not a Mad Max movie, the name Mad Max is in the title of this film, and it's from George Miller, who directed all the previous 4 Mad Max movies, and he's come back to direct this one. Because of all of that, I wanted to have that adrenaline rush from this film, and I didn't get that. This feeling of an emotional thrill ride of pure insanity, which Fury Road was. I remember watching Mad Max Fury Road for the first time about a year ago now, and even so I didn't wait 30 years myself to watch that movie. I felt like there had been this gap between Fury Road and its predecessor, Beyond Thunderdome. I think Beyond Thunderdome came out in 1985 and Fury Road came out in 2015, and you could tell there'd been this gap, but at the same time though, it still felt like Mad Max, and it still had that pure insanity and that craziness, and I really, really wanted that from this movie. And not to say I didn't get that from parts of the movie. There are parts of the movie which are utterly insane, but I think, to put it shortly, I wanted another Fury Road with this film, and I didn't get that, and that was why it really disappointed me the first time I saw it. That's why I came out of the cinema honestly so deflated, more deflated than I usually am when I come out of the cinema and I'm disappointed, because it was my most anticipated movie of the year. And that's why when I watched it the second time, I still liked it a lot more, but I was still let down by how I didn't have that feeling, that adrenaline rush that I wanted from a Mad Max movie, that the previous 4 Mad Max movies gave me, and this one didn't. And that was the biggest reason I didn't love this movie. And another reason I didn't love this film was because it uses a little too much CGI in my opinion. Something none of the other Mad Max movies really did. Like, I think there was some CGI in Mad Max Fury Road, but it wasn't noticeable. You could probably sit there and if you went through the film frame by frame, point out some CGI moments in Fury Road, but it wasn't noticeable. And something that I really loved, something that I really adored even about the previous 4 Mad Max movies, is how the action sequences in those movies are just crazy. There's people being flung from one vehicle to another, they're jumping on, having fights on one vehicle, people are firing guns, and the vehicles themselves are so, they have this design on them which is so, it just sticks in your mind. Yeah, those movies are just utterly insane, as I've said already. And the action sequences are what makes those movies utterly insane to watch, for me personally. And something I love about the action sequences and all the previous 4 Mad Max movies is how they were done practically. And here, the action sequences still felt like they had some practicality to them, but they also felt like they were relying a little more on CGI, and I didn't love that. And perhaps that's because George Miller, who's been making these Mad Max movies for about 40 years now, which is kind of crazy to think about, but perhaps it's because George Miller, who's 79 years old now, couldn't direct these action sequences the same way he did direct the action sequences of the previous 4 Mad Max films. So perhaps that's why they used more CGI. But I missed that grit and that realism of the action sequences, the huge, like, crazy and mind-boggling action sequences. I missed that grit and realism of those action sequences in the previous 4 Mad Max movies in this film. And another reason I didn't love this movie was because of the ending. Not because of the finale. I like how this film wraps up overall. But the very, very, very end of the movie, I didn't love. I didn't love some of the creative decisions. I actually think it would have made more sense if the film went another way. And if you've seen the movie, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. That all being said, though, I still like this movie quite a lot, and I still thought it was wildly entertaining. And like I said before, it had the feel of a Mad Max movie, and one of the reasons I really liked it was because it did a great job at giving us more of the world of Mad Max. Something none of the other Mad Max movies have really done. I think the only Mad Max film before this which really gives us more of the world of Mad Max is Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. But that's still more about Mad Max getting involved in all the stuff that he doesn't want to get involved in and being this reluctant hero. Whilst this film really expands on the world of Mad Max, shows us how this world functions. We see the inner workings of this world. We see the really horrifying places in this world, and we see how people bind together in the darkest times to follow someone honourable. That's what this film does very well. It expands on the world of Mad Max, and it makes this world feel more realised than perhaps the previous 4 films did. And I think that's something I will always appreciate from this movie, because none of the previous 4 Mad Max movies, although they give you a sense of this world and how post-apocalyptic this world has really become, they haven't give you a sense of the geography of the Mad Max world. You know what I mean? Where these locations actually are, how everything works in the Mad Max films, how people trade and how people rule, how these dumb idiots like Dr. Dementors in this movie actually get into power. And I think this film does a really great job at exploring that. And something I've already mentioned briefly, I'm going to go into more detail here on, is how this film made me care so much about Furiosa. Like, when I go back to rewatch Fury Road, which I'm planning to do in the next couple of days, because this film has really made me want to rewatch Fury Road, to the point that when I was this morning after I woke up, I was watching some videos from Fury Road of the chase sequence in that movie, because I forgot how good that film was. And when I go back to rewatch Fury Road in its entirety in the next couple of days, which I'm definitely going to do, I'm going to feel so much more of an attachment to Furiosa. Not that I didn't the first time I saw Fury Road, but now that I've seen the turmoil she went through, and the turmoil the character went through growing up, and now that I've seen all this about the Greenland, something which was touched on in quite a bit of detail, actually, now that I think about it, but something that was touched on but not really delved into in Fury Road, and that we get to see in this movie. All these things about Furiosa I learned from this film, I'm going to take with me the next time I watch Fury Road. It's going to make me appreciate that character so much more, because again, I liked that character quite a lot when I watched Fury Road for the first time. I really liked that character, but now I've got a feeling when I rewatch Fury Road, I'm going to love that character, and that's something Furiosa does very well. That's something this movie does very well. Plus, Chris Hemsworth as the villain is brilliant. This is my second favourite Chris Hemsworth performance. I love him in Rush, I've already said that, and I actually like him as Thor, by the way, because I don't love the Marvel movies, but I really enjoy watching him in them, because it actually feels like it's having fun. However, in this movie, it feels like he's having the most fun he's ever had playing a character. And I'm pretty sure he said that George Miller was his favourite director to work with. And you can feel that when he's on screen. He is eating up every single moment when he's playing this character. And he's spoken about how much the Mad Max franchise means to him as well. Like, I think his father was a stunt man on the original Mad Max film, with one of the stunt bike riders from that film, which is really cool to know that his father was in some way involved in the first Mad Max film, and now Hemsworth himself is involved in this newest Mad Max movie, and he is really just terrific in it. He plays this villain, he plays Dr. Dementus like as if Jack Sparrow was a bad guy. He played it like Jack Sparrow, but what if Jack Sparrow was a bad guy? And I really love that about it. You know, every single time he's on screen, he's chewing up scenery in the way you want him to. And I really liked that character as well, because it showed you that in this post-apocalyptic future, it shows you how in this post-apocalyptic future, I can't even say the word there. It shows you how in this post-apocalyptic future, these dumb idiots get into power and how they misuse power. And I really love how that was explored through his character. And I thought the pairing of Anya Taylor-Joy and Chris Hemsworth in this movie was really, really great. And whenever they're sharing moments on screen, or whenever the character Furiosa was sharing moments with the character Dr. Dementus, because it's not always, the character Furiosa isn't always played by Anya Taylor-Joy in this movie. In fact, Anya Taylor-Joy doesn't even come into this film until like the first hour. Like, it's about the hour mark where we first see Anya Taylor-Joy playing Furiosa. It's a young kid playing Furiosa before Anya Taylor-Joy does, and that young kid, I don't know the actress name, but she's a really great job. But whenever you see Furiosa and Dr. Dementus on screen, I was eating up. I wanted more of that, actually. That would be one of my smaller criticisms. Not a big criticism, I didn't feel I missed that loads, but it would be one of my smaller criticisms. Still, I loved every single time you saw Furiosa and Dr. Dementus on screen, and I thought those two characters were realised and explored terrifically throughout this film. And I really also loved how Furiosa didn't have many lines of dialogue in this movie. Kind of like Tom Hardy in Fury Road. Tom Hardy doesn't have that many lines of dialogue in Fury Road, and yet he's in it a lot. And that's something I think George Miller, as a writer and director, because I think he is credited as a writer on this movie, that's something he does very well at these characters in the Mad Max franchise. He's protagonist in the Mad Max franchise, because I'm pretty sure Mel Gibson's Mad Max in the first three Mad Max movies doesn't say much, and then you're constantly drawn to that character. I think that probably the most he says in the first Mad Max movie, and then when you see, not to go into spoilers because you haven't seen the first Mad Max film, but when you see how that film ends, it's understandable why I wouldn't say much in the sequels. And the same with Tom Hardy's Mad Max in Fury Road, assuming that's the same character. And what you see happen to Furiosa at the start of the movie, it makes sense why she wouldn't trust many people and why she wouldn't say much throughout the film, because she doesn't say much. It makes you drawn more to a character, and because Chris Hemsworth says so many lines of dialogue in the film, it really shows the dichotomy between those two characters. It really shows how different those two characters actually are. And yeah, I thought the decision to not give him any lines was actually a very good decision. I know some people have criticised that, but I really liked it. This film does have those huge, crazy action set pieces you want and expect from a Mad Max movie. I wish it had more of it. I'm not going to lie. I'm being completely honest. I wish it had more of those insane action set pieces, but there's one action set piece which lasts for about 16 minutes long, and it's the first proper action set piece we get in the movie, and I loved that. I loved that so much. And there are some terrific, nail-biting, Mad Max style action set pieces in this movie which I really loved. I just wish that musical score was better in those action set pieces, because the musical score by Junkie XL, aka Tom Hokenborg, for Fury Road was like pulsating, it was heart pounding, it was just truly masterful what he did with the score for that movie. He perfectly encapsulated the feel of Fury Road and made that film so much more intense in the score. And I wanted that from the score for this movie, because Junkie XL, aka Tom Hokenborg, returned to the score for this film. But I felt the score was lacking. And I know some people have praised the musical score for this movie. I don't totally get the praise myself. There were some really great moments in the score, but there's not enough great moments in the score. I felt the score was lacking that excitement and that intensity that the score to Fury Road had, that made that film so exhilarating and made that film such an adrenaline rush of emotional this emotional thrill, you know what I mean? And I think one of the reasons I didn't get that emotional thrill from this film as much as I got it from Fury Road was because of the musical score. I felt the musical score was lacking and could have been and should have been so much better, because it's the same composer as Fury Road, and much of this film feels the same as Fury Road, and in the best way, the way it looks, the way it's directed and everything like that. But because the score was lacking, I didn't get those same feelings as Fury Road personally. But still, you know, I liked many of the action set pieces. Another thing I really loved was how it gave us a different perspective on the Mad Max world, because so far, the only perspective we've had on the Mad Max world was through the character of Mad Max. But here, we get a perspective on the Mad Max world through Furiosa, a character we've only met once, and in a very different situation. So I really liked how we got a different perspective on the Mad Max world, and we got to see it through a woman's eyes, through a female character's perspective. Because again, we've only had it through a male character's perspective so far, and it was different seeing it in this light. I do feel there could have been more made about Furiosa's relationship with Immortan Joe's bride, because that's an important part of Fury Road. But I still really liked that we got to see this movie through a different perspective than we got to see the last four. Then we got to the last four Mad Max movies, and I really adored the world building, and I really adored how you felt this was a post-apocalyptic world when it came to this movie. You really felt like the Mad Max world, you really understood how post-apocalyptic and how harrowing it had become, because there are some harrowing sections to the film, I will say, some sections which really made me go, wow, I didn't expect to see that in a Mad Max film. And yet there was so much that I liked about it, so much that I liked. I just wished I loved it, you know? I wish I came out of this film feeling out of breath. That's what I wanted from it. The same way I kind of came out of Challengers earlier this year. I didn't expect to come out of Challengers feeling out of breath, but I did. The same way I came out of Dev Patel's directional debut Monkey Man, which came out earlier this year, but I didn't. I wanted this to be a proper nail-biting action blockbuster. Not to say there aren't some nail-biting moments in the movie, there certainly are, but I didn't come out of this film going, yeah! The same way I kind of came out, the same way I did when I finished watching the previous four Mad Max movies. Right, so this is an add-on. Something I wanted to mention when I was initially recording this podcast, but I meant to mention after I finished recording the podcast, as it always is this. Something I really love about this movie is the sound design, and also how cohesive George Miller keeps the huge, crazy action sequences in this film. Because the action sequences, when you're watching them, mind-boggling to watch. Like, how is he doing this? How's he doing all that? And they are crazy to watch at the same time. But he always keeps it cohesive. The action sequences are never messy. And that sounds like a small thing, but it's actually quite a big thing. Because I can't tell you how many big action blockbusters I've seen at the cinema where the action sequences have felt messy. But I never feel that with a Mad Max film, and I didn't feel that with the action in this movie, and I really love the sound design on the action sequences as well. It's a sort of film where you could hear a pin drop and everything goes quiet, and then the big action set pieces, you can still hear the rumble of the engines, though. It's something you can hear straight off the bat with this movie. You can hear it in the opening sequence, you can hear the rumble of the bike engines, you know what I mean? So yeah, I really love the sound design in this movie. I love how George Miller keeps everything cohesive in the action set pieces. So those were two things I forgot to mention about this film when I was initially recording this podcast, but two things I wanted to mention because I thought they were quite important in my review of this film. Anyway, back to the podcast and back to me rambling on about this movie. And it does feel more in line with Beyond Thunderdome than Fury Road. And the thing is about Beyond Thunderdome, I watched that film for the first time a year ago, and I didn't expect to go online after watching that film and seeing that that was probably the most disliked Mad Max film. I finished it and I was like, wow, that was brilliant. You know, that was a great conclusion to Mel Gibson's Mad Max. And I feel similar about Beyond Thunderdome as I do about this movie. I don't love this movie like I love Beyond Thunderdome, but I got a feeling over time I will come to love this film, and I will come to appreciate it for what it is. Again, I was just expecting a different movie. I built this film up in my head, and I think because the trailers did make this look like it was going to be this ride of pure insanity that was so intense to watch, and it wasn't that. But still, I built this movie up in my head, and because I built it up in my head, and because I was expecting a different kind of movie, I still feel a little disappointed by it. Not as disappointed by it as I was the first time I saw it, but I still feel a little disappointed by it. However, I like the film for what it is. I like it a lot. There's so much I like about it, particularly the world building. And I don't just like the film because of the world building, by the way. Something I really get annoyed by when I hear people discuss franchise movies and they say, well, I love this film because of the world building. And it's like, is that the only reason you loved it? Because a film shouldn't just be about world building. It should also serve a number of other things. It should also make you feel. It should make you feel emotion. You get attached to characters. Just have good characters and a great narrative and everything like that. And this film has all that. So I don't just love it because of the world building. I want to make that clear. I think the characters are very well done. I think the narrative is engaging, and I think it's a very good movie. I just wish I loved it. Oh, it pains me to say it. It was my most anticipated film of the year, and I wanted to come out of this film with the same feeling I had when I finished the previous 4 Mad Max movies, and I didn't. Still, I think it's a great movie and definitely worth a watch. And so, all in all, I'm going to say Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. I'm going to say that it's I'm going to say it's a 7.8 out of 10. I want to give it an 8 out of 10, but I only give films an 8 out of 10, films that I love, you know. I'm going to change that around a bit to make that sentence work better. I only give films an 8 out of 10 if I've loved them. And I know I keep saying it, but I'm going to say it again because it was my most anticipated movie of the year, and so I want to say it again. I didn't love it, which is why I can't give it an 8 out of 10. But listen, I like it for what it is. As a prequel to Furiosa, I think it works very, very well. It's just a different kind of movie than any of the previous Mad Max ones, which is why I'm adjusting to it a bit. Which is why it's taken me time to adjust to it, because the first 4 Mad Max movies, I think are one. Actually, I don't think they're one style of movie. I think the first 2 Mad Max movies are very similar to one another. I think Beyond Thunderdome is more similar to this, but even that movie has the chase at the end of it, and this movie doesn't really have a chase at the end of it. You know, the Mad Max movies, they're all about the chase, even to the point that Fury Road is literally a 2-hour car chase from start to finish. But this movie isn't that, and again, it's not about the chase, this one, and because it wasn't about the chase, I was thrown off by it. But I really feel like over time I keep telling myself that, and hopefully it does happen, but I really do feel like I'm going to love this movie soon. I just don't yet. So, I like it a lot. It's a shame it's flopping, but it's also not a huge surprise. It's flopping at the box office. I should make it clear there. It's flopping at the box office, but it's not a surprise because none of the Mad Max films have been huge hits. They are cult movies. I can completely understand why people would watch any of these films, including Furiosa and Mad Max Saga, and find that it's not for them. But again, I liked it because I'm a Mad Max fan and I like the world building, I like the characters that we meet in this movie, and I did really like the action set pieces. I just wish we got more of them. I wish there was more practicality because it feels like this film was a little more dependent on CGI, and I wish the ending was more satisfying. Not that the ending wasn't unsatisfying as a whole, but it wasn't as satisfying as I'd hoped. But, you know, it worked for me. And I'm happy that it did. And so, all in all, as I've already said, and as I'm going to say once more in this podcast today, Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, is a 7.8 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. Maybe you loved the film and it's your favourite film of the year so far, or maybe you hated the movie and you thought it was absolute pants. Whatever your thoughts are on Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, please let me know in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet and you enjoy the podcast, don't forget to click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. And look forward to many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As already said, thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And I suppose this is it. So I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.